Assalamu alaikum and welcome back, guys, for the seventh lesson on Python learning. Now think of a function like a coffee machine in a cafe. The function name, the name of the coffee machine, for example, latte maker 3000 or something. Parameters, the inputs you provide, like selecting the type of coffee, sugar level, or milk amount. These are similar to the ingredients you pass to a function, such as a name or a number. Process? Inside the coffee machine, it follows a set of instructions to mix the coffee, milk, and sugar based on your selection. This is like the code inside the function that processes the parameters. Return? After the machine finishes its job, it returns a cup of coffee. Similarly, after a function completes its task, it returns a result like a number or a message or something else. Just like how you don't need to know how the machine works internally, you can call functions without worrying about their internal code as long as you provide the right inputs and expect the right output. Today, we are going to learn about functions, functions arguments, why do we need functions, what are functions, and of course, we are going to live code that in the second session of the video. So, without further ado, let's jump in.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Today we would be learning all about functions, and of course, as always, we are going to focus on the two questions that we always ask. What are functions? Why do we need functions? These two questions are very important in understanding any topic. And of course, then we are going to talk about what are function arguments, a subtopic in functions. And we are going to learn then about how to code. So let's jump in without wasting any time. What are functions? Now, functions in programming is a reusable block of code designed to perform a specific task. Instead of writing the same piece of code over and over again, you can wrap it inside a function. Call that function whatever you need it, and the function will execute the task for you. For example, let's look at this example. If you want to calculate the square of a number, instead of writing the formula each time, you define it as function. For example, here I have defined a function which is calculating the square of a number. What I've done is I've defined the function once, and now I'm calling the function again and again and again. I do not need to write the function, the formula again and again. I just need to call that function. Now, this is a very simple example, and you might think that I can write number multiply number multiple times, and it does not matter. But imagine if you have a long function which is calculating the square, then calculating the cube, and then adding these two, and imagine anything. A more complex function. So you do not have to write that same number of lines again and again. You can just define a function and then you can call it multiple times without wasting multiple lines of code. Now let's talk about why. As I always said, it is very important to understand the why in any topic. So you have the code reusability, as we saw, that you can reuse the same code block multiple times without repeating it. Then you have modularity. Functions break your code into smaller, more manageable sections. You have maintainability. If you need to change a fix or fix a part of your code, you only have to do it once inside the function. This makes maintaining the code easier. For example, if the formula to calculate an employee's text changes, updating the text calculation function automatically reflects the change wherever it is used. Readability, then you have functions help make the code more readable by organizing code into functions, each with a clear purpose. Others, and you can easily understand the logic. And of course, we have abstraction, which hides the complexity of their internal logic. You don't need to know how a function works if the function is not written by you, but by somebody else, and you are only using it for your particular task. You only need to know what it does and what inputs it requires. I mean, you This is similar to how you use a coffee machine without knowing its internal mechanics, as we gave the example in the earlier introduction. So, in summary, function makes programming more efficient, easier to manage, and less prone to errors by allowing you to write code once and use it multiple times in a structured way. Now, let's talk about what are function arguments. Function arguments are the actual values you pass to a function when you call it. These arguments are given to a function's parameters, allowing it to operate on different values each time it is called. The parameters are like placeholders defined in a function, and arguments are the real values that fill those placeholders when you call that function. You would understand this when you see the code. We have multiple types of arguments. We have positional arguments, we have keyword arguments, we have default arguments, variable length arguments. If I define them in one sentence, then positional arguments match function parameters based on the order in which they're passed. Keyword arguments allow you to specify which parameters you're assigning a value to without worrying about the order. Default parameter lets you set a default value for a parameter, making the argument optional during function calls. And variable length arguments allow you to pass multiple arguments without specifying a fixed number of parameters. So this was a little summary of the topic we are going to cover today. So without wasting any time, we are going to jump into live coding. But as always, before jumping into coding, we have a quote which is, "Practice is not the thing you do once you're good, it's the thing you do that makes you good." Now let's switch over. So I am here at the VS Code. As you can see, I've already made a file with the name lesson7.py. I've put some comments, the syntax of the function, how do you define a function, basic function, function with parameters, return values, default values, positional arguments, keyword arguments. We're going to learn all of this. Let's talk about the syntax. You start with writing def and then you write the name of the function. The name could be anything, it's optional. Then you give it the parameters, the placeholders we were talking. A colon, and then the indentation, the function body, and then the return value. It's very similar to the for loop syntax and the if else syntax. You have the indentation for the body. Let's start with basic function. Let's write def greet, a very basic program. There's no need for parameters. I just said that it's optional. And let's this is a function that would print hello world. So there's no argument in this function. I would just write greet, the function name, and round brackets. Let's run this. As you can see, it printed hello world. Now I can write this multiple times and it would run the function and greet me with hello world. Now let's modify this function a little and then write def greet, but this time we are going to put name inside the round brackets. Name, N-A-M-E. This could be anything. Of course, it's optional and it's a variable name. You can write any name in it. This time we are going to print hello. We are using f string. I hope you are now familiar with f strings. And we are going to print hello whatever the values is stored in NAME name. This time when I'm going to invoke the function, I'm going to write greet round brackets, and inside the round brackets I am going to put the argument. Now this is the argument, the name is the parameter. Now you can see hello world, but this time it printed hello veggie because I have given it an argument saying that name is equals to veggie. Now let's talk about some functions that have return values. Let's define a function and call it add. Of course, as you can understand by the name, it is going to add two numbers. We gave it two numbers a and b. Now we are going to call that function. We say result is equals to add 5, 10. And then we are going to print result. Now you would see that it added the two numbers 5 and 10, and then it returned the result, the answer to the variable result, and then when we print the result had the value 15. Now let's talk about the default values. We are going to take the same example. We're going to write greet we're going to write name, but this time we are going to make it equal to some variable, some name, some text, some string, which is my name, Vaji. And then I'm going to write print f string, and in the f string I'm going to write the same hello in the curly brackets name. Now this time I am going to print why is this underscore there? Yes, let's remove that. This time I'm going to print two lines. First, greet with no arguments. Second, greet with an argument, let's call it my listener. I'm going to print you. Now let's run this. What's going to happen? It printed hello Vaji for the first time because I did not give it any argument. So by default, it took the argument that was Vaji. But in the second case, I gave it the argument my listener. So this time it did not take Vaji, but it took my argument. Now let's talk about the positional arguments. I talked about this in the lecture. So let's see an example and understand how it works. A simple function, a subtract function, which would subtract two numbers, a and b. Now let's call it result1, and when I say result1 is equals to subtract and I give it two numbers, let's say 5 and 10, and then define another result, this time result2. But this time let's change the order of the arguments that I am giving. Let's say this time we're going to give it 10 and 5 instead of 5 and 10. Now if I print these two results, what's gonna happen? Let's look at what's going to happen. So let's define an f string which says result1 is equals to result1 and result2 is equals to result2. So we can compare the two results. So we have the same function, but we have changed the position of the arguments that we are giving it. Now let's see. As you can see, result1 is -5, but result2 is +5. So you see the answer has changed because this is a positional argument. It by default takes the first value as A and the second value as B. Now we can modify this and we can make it keyword argument. How do we do that? What is keyword argument? Which does not care about the order. What we would do is we would specify A is equals to 5 and B is equals to 10. And in the second line, we are going to similarly define that. Now, even though I have put 10 in the first place at line number 58, you see the results are the same. But because I have specifically defined the arguments, so now the order does not matter whether A is defined first or B is defined first. So now I can get the same result even though the order has changed. We have another interesting topic, which is variable length arguments. Which variable? Variable, yes. So this is very interesting. What if I want to pass multiple arguments to a function? Do I write multiple numbers and then do I write multiple parameters while defining the functions? No. What I can do is I can put static and then items. Now I can pass this function a list of elements. I do not have to write multiple A, B, C, D. So what I do is let's say I need a function that is going to print the items, the name of the items. Let's do that. So what I'm doing is for items in items is going to be passed to this function, an f string print f, and let's print item. Now let's call this function. How do you call this function? You write the name of the function, and you see I'm now passing this function multiple strings: apple, banana, kiwi. As you can see, it printed number of items which I wrote in line number 65, and then it printed all the elements that were passed to this function without having me to write A, B, C, D for every element. Now I just write static and items. Now there's another interesting thing, which is double static. What double static does is it parses the dictionary, the keywords, the key value pairs. So you can pass the dictionary as well as the list to this function. Let's look at the example and then you'll understand more. Let's say I am writing the details of the customer that has ordered these items. So what I'm doing is for key value and details. Details is my dictionary, and in this dictionary I am going to simply print the key and the value. Now you would understand the key and the value when you look at the values that I'm going to pass to this function. Now I have already passed this list. Now I am going to pass some dictionary values, key values. So I'm doing this name equals to Vaji. This is key value pair in dictionary, if you remember when we studied the dictionary. And then I'm going to write address is equals to not provided. Let's go with that. Now if I run this, what's going to happen? Let's run this. If I run this, now you see, let's pull this up. You have number of items, apple, banana, orange, kiwi. Actually, it should say name of the items rather than number of the items, because they are the names. Let's run this again with name. Okay, this looks better. Name of items, apple, banana, orange, kiwi. Order details. Now these are the details of the customer. Name, Vaji. Address not provided. So this is basically how you define a variable length arguments using the functions. So in today's lecture, we talked about functions. We talked about the syntax of the function, the basic function, parameters, return values, default values, positional arguments, keyword arguments, variable length arguments. So by the end of this video, you should be able to be very familiar with how you define a function. So practice hard, and that's it for today. I hope that you practice and you become a pro, a master in this. So I wish you good luck and take care of yourself.